Goody will drive. Left-handed flush over the top of Kepning.
Pullback, step back three. Bottom!
Mavericks, it's short. Tip back in. Weaver got it. Yes!
Neely, the handoff. Jones for the tie.
Oh, he's fouled and one.
Presents itself is what you got to take. You can't.
It's knocked away. Still loose. Doherty the heave. Oh, my God.
Welcome to the Straight Outta WAC podcast.
What's up, everybody? It is the Straight Outta WAC. We're not going to call it the podcast today. We're going to call it Straight Outta WAC Live as we get ready to preview the WAC Openers for basically everybody except for Utah Tech men, Utah Tech women, and the Southern Utah women and CBU women played last night. So welcome, everybody, to this crazy November day of WAC basketball. Oh, it's so exciting because these games mean so much. Today, Saturday, and there's a couple games next week because, as we all know, 8 teams make it to WAC Vegas, and that is determined by your conference record. So these games are huge, and usually these games aren't played till late December or early January. So teams are going to have to adjust on the fly here because these games mean a whole lot more than the non-conference slate. So goodness, 4 women's games tonight, 5 men's games. On the women's side, things tip off at 6 p.m. Central when UT Arlington and Abilene Christian do battle at Moody Coliseum in Abilene. Stephen F. Austin and Tarleton tip off at 7 p.m. Central at Wisdom Gym. UTRGV at Grand Canyon and Utah Valley at Seattle U, both tipping off at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. On the men's side, there's 5 games tonight. Tarleton at SFA and GCU at UTRGV get us off to a quick start. Seattle U at Utah Valley at 6 p.m. Mountain Time from the UCCU Center. I'll be there. ACU and UT Arlington are live from College Park Center at 7 p.m. Central. And California Baptist at Southern Utah tips at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time from America First Event Center in Cedar City. Daryl will join me in a little bit to talk about the women's games, kind of look back at Tuesday's title rematch between California Baptist and Southern Utah and Cedar City last night. If you want to read about that, go to our Substack page. The description's in the link. Daryl had a nice recap about what went on there. Kinsley Barrington had a big night against her former team. It was just Chloe Webb went for 20-plus points again. It was a good game up until about the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, before the Lancers pulled away. So, a lot going on in these games that matter right now. Remember, like I said, only 8 teams go to WAC Vegas. Those 8 teams are determined by record and WAC play. So this WAC Wednesday and then December 2nd, Saturday, for most teams, December 6th for others, they matter, big time. Me and Spencer McLaughlin, who is the broadcaster for Southern Utah, we talked about that the other day, or I should say yesterday before the CBU SUU women's game. So it's going to be a fun one. There's a lot going on. Kind of wild to think that, these games matter so much in the grand scheme of things, considering that, coaches like to coach differently now in November and December compared to what they do January, February, and March. So teams are still trying to figure out rotations. Teams are still trying to figure out roles, especially teams with newcomers, a lot of newcomers. So it's going to be interesting to watch how things play out on this WAC Wednesday. Let's talk about one of the first 2 men's games of the night. One of the first 2 men's games of the night. Tarleton at SFA. First off, we want to send our thoughts and prayers to Tarleton head coach Billy Gillespie. The Texans put out a release that he is out indefinitely. I know that he missed the SoCal Challenge because of a medical circumstance, so I'm not sure what's going on. I haven't received any news on that, just that he is out indefinitely from their release. So prayers, well wishes, all kinds of thoughts going out for the old ball coach for the Texans. Joseph Jones will take over as head coach during Gillespie's absence. The Texans went 2-0 at the SoCal Challenge, won the Sand Division. Ja'Cory Smith, had a big week there in Southern California. So he averaged 22.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, was the tournament MVP. And so they did good things without their head coach on the sidelines. Can they do it again in Nacogdoches? I'm not sure. Stephen F. Austin's not very happy. They won 2 games, beat LMU, and beat a good Drake squad at the Grand Cayman Islands Classic. But then they got throttled by Utah State by 30. They didn't shoot it well. Utah State was on fire, especially in the second half. Now they're back home. You get a pizza cutter. The first 200 people in the sawmill get a pizza cutter, SFA pizza cutter, I should say. So I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens in this game. 2 teams that like to get physical, that like to play defense, that like to play with pace. AJ Kajus has been really good. Day Hall is a matchup nightmare. Krishan Christmas, when I saw him in person, I was even more impressed with his athleticism and his ability and his strength. I think the Lumberjacks are going to win this ball game, but I think it's going to be closer than people think. The last 2 times these 2 teams have played, the home team has won, and one game was decided by 6 points, one game was decided by 5 points. So these teams know each other. They know how to play. They're going to get to the foul line. There's going to be a lot of fouls called tonight. Let's just be real. In the sawmill, there's going to be a ton of fouls called. I'm the advantage is to the home team here, but it's December, so who knows? And Tarleton always plays with a chip on his shoulder, maybe even more so now that they don't have their coach on the sideline, so they have even more to play for. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. If there's anybody out there listening, share a comment, share your thoughts, whatever you want, as we go along here, as we break down these games. But tip-off is at 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus. That's a lot for the first game of the night. So let's take a quick 30-second break, and we'll come back and break down, look at UTRGV and GCU. All right, guys, we're back. Let's take a look at this GCU and UTRGV ball game. It's the first trip out of the state of Arizona for the Lopes. They are 4-1 right now, and every game has been in and around the Phoenix area. So that'll be interesting to see. South Texas, not an easy trip, although they did charter a flight, it looks like, from their social media posts through Allegiant Airlines, which makes it a little bit easier. The lone loss came against, South Carolina in that Arizona Tip-Off Classic last week. One of those games that kind of got away late from the Lopes. And the big thing was that weekend, then those 2 games against San Francisco and South Carolina, they didn't get a lot of bench production. The other night in their win over North Dakota State, Sid Curry had a double-double off the bench. So there were some big things that, they did well at home. At GC Arena. So the big question is, can they do it on the road in a true road game? One of the few that GCU has on the schedule this year. We know there's one coming up in December that they're going to maybe make it into a home game at Liberty. We'll talk about that on another episode. But can the Lopes do what they've done thus far this season and win by double digits against an opponent? Even though I have all the respect for UTRGV, I'm going to say it. They're sub 300 in KenPom right now. So can GCU keep up with the narrative and blowing out teams that they should blow out? That'll be interesting to watch. Ty and Grant Foster's been really good. Ray Harrison's been really good. It's just one of those things where they should win by double figures. They should win easily, but you never know, okay? Playing at UTRGV Fieldhouse, it's a tough place to play for teams. And UTRGV's been so bad to start this season. They have 5 losses, all of them by 15 points or more. Their only 2 wins have come against non-Division I opponents, so they haven't beat a Division I opponent. And they haven't played a Division I opponent at home yet. So what are we going to get from the Vaqueros? I don't know that they have the offense to keep up. They did lose, Justin Johnson from last year, Will Johnston, Adante Hellman. Those were the three best offensive players last year. But could a surprise be in the mix with GCU playing its first true road game? It maybe. I don't think so. You just look at it, and these are two teams in very different spots right now. GCU wants to keep moving up and setting that stage for that Liberty game in December and making a statement that the WAC is theirs to lose this year. So I don't know if this is going to be close. I really don't. And I say that with all due respect because I want UTRGV to do well. I like what UTRGV has. I like what they're doing down there in Edinburgh. I'm going there in January. So I just don't see it, though. They don't have the offense to keep up with the Lopes, and the Lopes play defense too. So it'll be very interesting to watch play out just to see what kind of mindset GCU comes in with in their first true road game. Let's talk about ACU at UT Arlington. This game's kind of interesting. Cinco Boone was an assistant at UT Arlington under Greg Young, finished out the season under Snoop Johnson when Greg Young was let go. He returns home or back to Arlington, back to College Park Center, where Shamar Wilson, Brandon Talbot, Aaron Cash are still there. So he's going to coach against former players. He knows how good Shamar Wilson is. Cinco Boone is part of the ACU staff now under Brett Tanner. The Mavs are coming off a bad loss to Texas State. Dejuan Gordon didn't play well. Shamar Wilson's been really good for the Mavs over the first month of the season. The question is, who's going to score more points? We'll throw everything out the window. Who's going to score more points? Okay, ACU, I believe I had it written down here. They average something like 76, or 70 points a game. UT Arlington averages about 76 or so. So, these two teams that can score. Keep an eye on Manny Allen and Dejuan Gordon. Gordon didn't start the last game, didn't even have a point against Texas State. Manny Allen, the Wildcats' leading scorer from last season, hasn't really got going yet in this, early month of the season. I think those two guys could have a breakout night, but these two teams play with pace. They want to push tempo. They want to get up and down the floor. They like to shoot from the perimeter. This is going to be a high-scoring game, and there's going to be a lot of foul shots taken in this ballgame too, because both teams foul quite a bit. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Like I said, I think this is going to be in the 145, 155 range in points-wise, because I think there's going to be a lot of scoring at College Park Center. Let's take another 30-second break. We're going to talk about Seattle U and Utah Valley coming up. I have my interview from ESPN 960 that I did earlier today with Bryce Larson. So we'll take a 30-second break. All right, guys, we're back. I am going to play a little portion of my radio appearance today on ESPN 960, the Valley Sports Show with Bryce Larson. We talked about the Seattle U at Utah Valley game, so I want you to listen to that. And you can share your thoughts if you have them. I haven't seen any comments come through. You can leave them on the YouTube page if you want. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these live streams or any of our podcast episodes. It's always a good time. Like I said, we're going to have Daryl on here in just a little bit to talk about the women's games and maybe talk about the CBU SUU men's game tonight in Cedar City. So give me just a second and I'll bring that up for you.
Let's jump into that matchup between Utah Valley and Seattle U. Currently, ESPN Bet has Seattle as a 2.5-point favorite over Utah Valley. It's banner night where they are going to raise the WAC regular season championship banner and also recognize that team from a season ago that made that run deep in the NIT last year. what do you think about this matchup? I know you mentioned it's very interesting. One of the top matchups in the league. Let's break it down a little bit further here.
So people don't know the series is tied at 13. The last couple of games in Orem. So last year, Riley Grigsby had to bank in a 3-pointer to kind of steal the win for Seattle U late. A couple of years ago, it was Morgan Means that went coast to coast with the layup. As time expired to give the Redhawks the win. In 2020-21, Trey Woodbury, hit a 3 from the top of the key in overtime at the Redhawks Center to give the Wolverines a win. Like, this series is so fun. It's so entertaining, and it's been so competitive over the last 4 or 5 years, right? Like, people don't understand this is an underrated rivalry that doesn't get enough pub because, well, we know people look at Seattle U as an outlier. Utah Valley, they had a 28-win season last year, but they're a bunch of newcomers this year. So, I mean, it is crazy, and the thing is Seattle U has won in Orem 2 of the last 3 times they've played there. It was 87-85, 2019-20. It was 85-80 last year. So it's just, you got Cam Tyson on one side. You got Drake Allen, who played against Seattle U last year and who didn't like playing at the Redhawks Center. So maybe he'll like playing at home against the Redhawks this year in Orem. These games are so entertaining, and you just don't know what's going to happen. Seattle U could win by 15 tonight. If Utah Valley shoots as poor as it has in previous games this season, or Utah Valley could light it up and Seattle U could struggle. Like, there's so many different variations of this ball game because both of these teams are pretty even. On paper, I think maybe the experience and the what's the word I want to say? Consistency of the Redhawks, that they know their rotations, they know their roles, may come into play and benefit them a little bit over Utah Valley. But I don't know. This is why I circle this game, because the games in Orem or any game between Seattle U and Utah Valley are always fun to watch because you just don't know what you're going to get.
All right, you guys, that was my segment on ESPN 960 for the Utah Valley Seattle U men's basketball game tonight, taking place in Orem at the UCCU Center. And like I was telling Bryce, the series is tied 13-13. The last year in Orem, Riley Grigsby, like I said, had to bank in a 3-pointer from the top of the key to basically seal the win for the Redhawks in Orem. It was the only loss at home for the Wolverines last year. So, and the thing is, Seattle U knows how to win in Orem. Like, it's wild. Couple years, like I think it was 2019, 2020, maybe, that it was Morgan Means who went coast to coast in Orem to win the game. So these games come down to maybe the last 4 or 5 possessions at most. It's just one of those series that is underrated. People don't pay attention to because Seattle U is a little outlier. They're not really technically close. It's not an in-state game, but Utah Valley is closer to Seattle U than most anybody else. So even Chris Victor last year, when I talked to him before this series, he said that the Utah Valley is probably their biggest rival in this conference. So this is a big game. You got a team that want to share the WAC title 2 years ago in Seattle U. You have a team who won the WAC title, regular season title, last year. So these two teams know how to win. I think the difference is Seattle U has a little bit more experience. They have a little bit more depth than Utah Valley does. They've been together. They lost Riley Grigsby, Emeka Denny. That was it. They brought back everybody else. So how will that play a factor in Orem tonight when tip-off, takes place 6 p.m.? Will the Redhawks, see the banner raising and, be caught up in all that? Maybe Utah Valley will be on their own, considering that there's only 2 guys technically that played a lot last year on the Utah Valley squad that were even part of that, 28-win team. I know that Trevin Lenhart was there and Cash Fields were there, but they didn't play a lot. So, yeah, it'll be very interesting because there's a big, interesting dynamic going on with Utah Valley and Seattle U tonight in Orem. And just the fact that one team, I want to say both have been a little inconsistent to start the season. Seattle U has had some ups and downs. They should have beat VCU. That kind of got taken away from them late in the second half. But they've had some good wins at home. So we'll see what they do on the road in Orem. It's going to be a nice, I think it's going to be a packed UCCU Center, a well-attended event because it's Native American Heritage Night as well, plus the WAC Openers. So they've been really promoting this game. So it should be a fun one. It always is between the Red Hawks and Wolverines, one of those games that you just love to have. So with that being said, let's talk about this CBU at SUU game. I'm going to bring in Daryl here. We're going to talk a little bit about this because he's watched some CBU men's games. Daryl, how you doing today, big guy?
Good. How about you, Kyle?
I'm good. We're just talking hoops. So CBU at Southern Utah tonight, 6:30 tip-off from the America First, 6:30 Mountain Time tip-off from the America First Event Center. I'm very interested to see how this game plays out because CBU hasn't traveled outside the state of California so far this season. This is their first true road game, kind of like GCU, right? And then you have a Southern Utah squad that's coming off a win over Texas State, that same Texas State squad who just beat UT Arlington, and they're playing at home. They've only played at home one time so far this season. They've been on the road quite a bit in November. Newcomers all around for both squads, right? We got Braden Housley, who's one of the best freshmen in the WAC, leading Southern Utah. He's their point guard. And, you got Dominique Daniels on the other side for CBU, who's quick as a cat. I don't know. I'm very interested to see how this game plays out. Rob Jeter, new head coach at Southern Utah in his first WAC game. Rick Roy, who's been at CBU forever, he knows how this league, plays out, but you don't know what you're going to get with a new coach, right? On the other sideline. So
yeah, absolutely. And you're also looking at a game where this is a CBU team that has been in a number of games this year, close games. They lost that buzzer beater to Portland State at home.
That was a wild ending.
The question is, can they finish and can they finish on the road?
Yeah.
When you look at the number of games CBU has lost in the WAC the last 2 years on the men's side, what is it, like 15 or something like that? I bet you half of them have been decided by 10 points or less in the final 30 seconds.
Yeah, agreed. The thing to watch in this ball game, both teams are loaded with guards. Zion Young, Braden Housley, Prophet Johnson, among others for Southern Utah. Dominique Daniels, Scotty Washington, among others for CBU. The paint. I'm very interested to see what plays out in the paint. I think CBU has a significant advantage there. Nothing against Parsifala because he's been balling out for Southern Utah. But after Parsifala, there's not much there for the T-Birds in the paint. You have Ivan Udrago. I've heard Braden say that, Braden Bell, the broadcaster, from GCU, who is now in a CBU uniform. You've got Hunter Goodrick down there as well. And you got Malik Way that you can bring off the bench as well. So advantage Lancers in terms of the paint. It's going to come down to the guards. Like which guards are going to play better on Wednesday night. That'll be the interesting, thing to watch out for. I don't know. I'm very interested to see how it plays out because like we said, the Lancers aren't great away from what's now the Fowler Event Center. So I'm very interested to see how it all plays out for them in Southern Utah. And we saw one CBU team win down there last year. So I guess we'll see what happens with the other CBU team. Do you think that the CBU men were there cheering on the CBU women last night? I might have to check with Braden and Doc and see if that was the case.
I don't remember seeing that on the broadcast or on socials, but in a lot of cases when one team is off and the other team is playing, that team that is off does go and cheer on the other team.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, the women's game was moved to Tuesday because of a facility conflict.
Yeah, and then it's weird because these games, these WAC games, usually it's the men playing in one place and the women playing in the other. So I wonder if there's something going on at Fowler Event Center. I'll have to check and confirm that because one of the teams should have played at Fowler Event Center over playing in Cedar City. So it's a very rare thing where you'll see both the men and women's team in the same location playing a conference game this season. But to that point, one name that I think for CBU fans to keep an eye on, or even Hoops fans, Brantley Stevenson, the Cal Poly transfer, he comes off the bench. He does some good things for the Lancers. And Blondo Chiqueño, I hope I said that right. I think I did. Those two guys have an immediate impact for the Lancers. So I don't know. I'm very interested to see how this game is going to play out because both teams like to shoot the three. Both teams like to play with pace. Both teams but both teams can slow it down too. Like they just can play the snail's pace as well. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out. I'm not sure it'll be as interesting. Well, I don't want to say as interesting. It will be as interesting as the women's game that took place at the America First Event Center last night in a title rematch from the WAC Tournament Championship game between the California Baptist Lancers women's basketball team and the Southern Utah T-Birds women's basketball team. I'm going to say two things, and it might offend people. It might not make people happy. I'm not sure CBU came in with the right mindset to start the game, but I also think Southern Utah had a little chip on its shoulder because people are kind of doubting the T-Birds right now with the fact of who they've lost and who hasn't played yet and the struggles they've had. So I think that played a little bit of I don't want to say a little bit, a big part in the start, maybe the first half, 2.5 quarters of that ball game. What do you think?
Playing on the road in this conference is never easy. I think Tracy Sanders' team came out and really battled for about 3 quarters and made it really difficult for CBU to get into their stuff. But that you got to be able to finish in the fourth quarter, and that's where a team, CBU with basically everybody back minus Trinity San Antonio, Dorcas Wu, Brittany Clayman, still figured out how to put the pieces together and win. What was it to start the quarter? Like a 12-0 run or something like that. The first couple of minutes basically put that game out of reach. I have no doubt Southern Utah will play a role in the regular season race, whether they spoil somebody's chances at the outright title or knock somebody out of the top 8. I just don't know when they're going to put the pieces together. And Tracy Mason challenged her team with a tough non-conference schedule, and at 1-5, where are they going to pick up a Division I win at this point?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're close. They're missing that player, that one player like they had with Sharita Daughtry last year that they could put the ball in her hands and say, go get us a bucket or go create something out of nothing. I don't think De La Bellini is there yet. She's close, but she's not quite there. She's not quite the scorer that Sharita was. Megan Smith is dependable in the paint. Sam Johnson, and you pointed out in your recap article that they've struggled from 3-point range. They were 8 of 28 last night from 3-point range in a game where you have to hit perimeter shots to keep up with the Lancers. So they did it for a bit, but they're missing a few pieces. They miss Lizzie Williamson and her defensive presence, obviously. And Tamika Whitman, hopefully she gets back on the floor, at some point in the next month or two. We'll have to see, but I think there's some good things. Ava Ulrich, I believe is how Spencer says it. She's really good as a freshman. Like she's going to be a great player for the T-Birds going forward.
Oh, and I even tweeted that during the game. When we get to March, if she's not on the all newcomer team, I'll be, completely shocked. And Chloe Lemon's been off to an impressive start when it comes to newcomers for CBU. She had 10 points, 7 of them in the second quarter when the game was still in doubt. She's done some good things for Jared Olson. But I want to look. When we talk about the Lancers, you have to talk about Chloe Webb. Yes, has picked up right where she left off, but so has Grace Schmidt.
Yep.
Second team All WAC last year, the postseason WBI MVP, first team preseason selection, 10 or what did I say was 6 straight games of 10 points or more, or no, 10 straight games of 10 points or more. The last 4 of last year, plus the first 6 of this year. And we look at the collegeinsider.com poll. It looks like the Lancers broke through at number 25 this week, but did not receive votes by the AP poll, although there are a number of mid-majors receiving votes. So hopefully if the Lancers keep this up, the AP voters will start noticing that soon.
So I saw that the other day, and I'm still a little baffled at it, okay? When that came out, California Baptist was 5-0. They had won 2 games on the road at UC San Diego and at San Diego State. And then they beat, won 3 games, Long Beach State. I can't remember who the 4th one was, and then they beat Portland, right? So that Portland squad is an NCAA tournament squad. Like, they are very, very good. And I still have to wonder how in the world, and no offense to the Lopes, and this is not anti-GCU bias like some people want to say, how in the world California Baptist is behind GCU in that College Insider mid-major top 25 poll. And I say that because, 1, CBU doesn't have any home losses. 2, I get and I respect that they played Oregon at home. I totally 100%.
And hung with Oregon.
That GCU, they did, but you still have to win games. Like, those are important, right? You can't lose to a Montana at home. And the same, like somebody pointed out, GCU women have not gotten go. They're just kind of cruising by right now. They had 2 big double-digit wins this past weekend at home, in their MTE. So that was a good start. And I think they're going to get another one tonight. We'll get to that in a minute. But, they haven't been full throttle for a full game yet, while CBU has, if that makes sense. I think the difference is with CBU, you have players who are back, key players who are back. Chloe Webb, Grace Schmidt, Nene Calhoun. Like, you just have players that are there, that have been there, that know the system. GCU is still trying to mix in all these new players and figure out, the roles and stuff like that. So it just – I told this somebody the other day, like, it baffles me how these rankings come out. It's like, what am I missing and what am I watching that somebody else isn't? Like, so teach their own, right? So we'll leave it at that. But we're going to take a 30-second break, come back, and we're going to preview the 4 women's games, Daryl and I, as we get closer to tip-off this evening. Okay, so we're back. I got an update about what's going on at the CBU Event Center. Not the CBU Event Center, the Fowler Event Center on the campus of California Baptist University. They weren't able to play there because there was a the CBU Christmas concert set up that's going on. So that's why both teams are in Cedar City this weekend. So, and then the director of ops told me that the practice time for CBU was at the same time as the women's basketball game, so they weren't able to be at the America First Event Center to watch the women's game last night. So there's that. Thank you for that. I'll leave names out, but thank you for that text message I just got. So let's talk about these women's games tonight. Daryl, which one kind of sticks out to you? I know we got UT Arlington at Abilene Christian. We got SFA at Tarleton, Utah Valley at Seattle U, and UTRGV at GCU. You go with yours first and kind of break down what you're looking for. I'll go with mine, and then we'll break down the other 2.
All right. I want to start with that Tarleton SFA game. Last time out, the Texans scared the pants off of an Eastern Washington team that is also receiving votes in that mid-major poll and that is expected to win the Big Sky regular season title. And that game came down to a missed 3 at the buzzer from the left wing. No matter how many times Eastern Washington pulled away, Tarleton had an answer.
And that was a good look too from 3. Like that was a great look. Like you want that look.
Yeah, you'll take that look. 7 days out of the week and twice on Sunday. And Bill Brock's team has consistently competed against Division I teams, whether they're Texas Tech from the Big 12, to the Big Sky favorites. They have been in every single one of their Division I games this year, which has been really impressive. And if I'm not mistaken, somebody can correct me on the Twitter if I'm wrong. Teresa De Silva did not play in that loss to Eastern Washington. So
I'll look that up. Keep talking. I'll look that up right now.
The Texans have been hanging around people, and the only reason we voted them as low as we did, Chelsea Mendelson and I did in our preseason, is we did not know a lot about the group that was going to be around her. But this Texan team is going to find a way to be relevant. Will they make the top 8? That's a question that we'll answer, in a couple of months.
Yeah.
But they will compete, and they will make every team that steps on the floor against them this year earn their wins. They will not be a pushover.
So to confirm that, Teresa De Silva did not play against Eastern Washington. So the leading scorer for the Texans did not play in a game that they lost. What was it, by 2?
Yeah, that was a 3 for the win.
64-62. Yeah, so crazy. And like you said, they hung with Texas Tech, lost by 7 in Lubbock. They lost by 9 at the Pit against New Mexico. So those are good games, and they had the Northwestern State game that was postponed. Probably won't be made up because there was, COVID protocols within the Northwestern State, program. I'm very interested to see how this plays out. 2 new head coaches.
Yep.
And Leonard Bishop for SFA, Bill Brock for Tarleton. Lots of new faces. Kirsten Harden was the WAC Player of the Week this week, after what she did in their wins. And then I think it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle at Wisdom Gym. Never an easy place to play. SFA has been up and down to start the Leonard Bishop era. They've hung with some teams. They hung with Liberty. They're actually the only win that the Flames have, the Lady Flames have this year. So this is going to be interesting. I'm very interested to see how this game plays. I like that you picked that game because there's a lot of intrigue with a Tarleton team that won 3 games last year, 3 WAC games,
something like that. Yeah.
And an SFA team that's still trying to find its footing and kind of get back to where they want to be regularly. So we'll see what happens.
Nice win for SFA on Saturday against Rice in the Johnson Coliseum. Rice out of the American Athletic, I believe was preseason 3rd in their poll. Yeah. So that's a really good win for Leonard Bishop and company. The consistency, you have that last, their last home game, they struggled mightily against North Texas. Yeah. So what SFA team shows up is going to be the question there.
Yeah. And, Tarleton won 2 games last year in WAC play. So this is an intriguing matchup. This is Daryl's intriguing matchup. I like it. I'm going to go with the UT Arlington at Abilene Christian matchup. Sharika Wright's team finally picked up their first win of the season this past weekend against North Carolina A&T out at the St. Mary's, Invitational MTE. Julie Goodenough's team picked up a win over Navy, where freshman Peyton Hull went for, 34, I believe?
34 points on 9 of 16 from 3.
Yeah, and she won WAC Newcomer of the Week honors for that performance. So this is a very, very, very interesting matchup because, like I said, UT Arlington is coming off its first win of the season. And ACU, I believe, if I remember right, that was their first win over a Division I opponent.
That's correct, Kyle. They hung with Towson the day before the Colonial regular season co-champions that lost by like 7 or something like that. But yeah, this is their
And
first.
they lost by 11 to Rice. So they are, they have one win over Division One opponent. UT Arlington has one win over Division One opponent. ACU, and I don't think did Addison Martin play in the Navy win? Yeah, she
Yes,
did.
she did.
Played. So
Yeah, she did. Double.
ACU has Addison Martin, Aspen Thornton, Bella Earl, all returned from last year, all started from last year. UT Arlington doesn't have any starters back, and Sharika's still trying to get everybody into their role. Avery Brittingham, we know from SFA, and Talia Clark from Seattle U. So this is an interesting matchup for me because neither one, I want to say UT Arlington, they haven't played particularly well up until this St. Mary's trip last weekend. And ACU, we don't know a ton because we haven't seen them a lot, if that makes sense. So we know that they have a really good freshman in Peyton Hull. Addison Martin, they call Big Country. So we know that they have some experience and leadership there. I'm very interested to see how this plays out with two teams that are still trying to find their footing, I feel like, in this 2023-24 season.
Yeah, and for UTA, you bet you're not going to find a tougher non-conference schedule to find your footing in than the one Sharika Wright put together. I mean, what's next for them after this? Was it Colorado, I think, in a week or two?
Yeah.
In Boulder. They played Texas already. Those are two NCAA tournament teams from a year ago, two Power 5 NCAA tournament teams from a year ago. With I'm betting that schedule was made with, Star Jacobs still being there in mind. But still, those are two tough non-conference games to figure out, not to mention New Mexico State in that WAC CUSA. Are we using the term alliance?
Oh, I don't know. Don't get me started. I would say just scheduling initiative because it's what they technically called it. So WAC CUSA scheduling initiative.
And that's on New Year's weekend at the College Park Center. That's, not to go past conference, but that New Year's slate of WAC CUSA games is really good too.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting that teams are going to have to play that game before they start league play. So, very interesting. The other two games on the slate, let's get to those. Utah Valley at Seattle U and UTRGV at GCU. Utah Valley, the women's team they're playing better. They got a road win over Idaho this past week, which was nice. Now they go on a true road trip to the Pacific Northwest, where Skylar Young's crew has not won a game yet. They need to get him his first win. But their schedule is brutal too. I don't know where they're going to get a win. I think I wrote about this on our Substack page in one of the newsletters. Utah Valley, like I said, their women's team is coming off they're coming off a win over Westminster and a win over Idaho on Saturday. Seattle U, like I said, hasn't won a game. So the question is, what's going to take place at the Red Hawk Center on Wednesday night between these two teams, Daryl?
Boy, howdy, I don't know. Other than that close loss on opening night to Cal State Northridge in Los Angeles, the Red Hawks have not really been competitive other than one other occasion. I believe it was against Washington last week. They got blown out by UC Irvine, blown out by Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, both by somewhere around the area of 20 points. But they managed to hang around with Washington. So I'm curious to see which Red Hawk team shows up. For Utah Valley, that was actually a really good road win against Idaho. Battling foul trouble. Allie Criddle had a nice game. Kaylee Bion picked up right where she left off from last year. And Jenna Dick had a really nice afternoon too. The question is, can Dan Nielsen's crew string together two Division I road wins in a span of about, 5 days?
Yeah.
Luckily, it's in the same time zone.
Yeah.
And luckily, it's...
I'm wondering if they just went to Seattle. I'll have to find out about that. But, the interesting thing about it is last year, Seattle U swept both of these games against the Wolverines. They won 66-58 in Orem, and then they won 66-51 at the Red Hawk Center. So that's something to keep an eye on. The Red Hawks like to shoot three-pointers. They're not big. Their roster's not big. So they have a bunch of guards. They like to get up and down. It's just a matter of, I think, being overwhelmed sometimes, with talent discrepancy or talent, gap or whatever. Talent gap. That's what I'm looking for. So I think that's a big issue that Skylar is going to address. He will. He'll get there. He's got a lot of holdovers from Susie Barkham's club last year in his first season as head coach. But I just think there's a big talent gap right now between the Red Hawks and other teams in the WAC. And Dan Nielsen's crew is healthy, and they're deep this year, a little bit deeper than they were last year. So Kaylee Bayon, Allie Criddle, Paige Gibb, you mentioned it. I think the Wolverines get, a conference win right out of the gate in the Red Hawk Center tonight in the Pacific Northwest.
I'm with you, Kyle. And when we talked to Skylar Young in the preseason, he said that they were going to be a space and a pace kind of team, right?
Yep.
So in order to have space and pace, you can't be taking the ball out of your own net.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the issue is the fact that they're giving up points defensively, but they have to be able to hang with people on the offensive end. I mean, that Northridge game was 91-82 or something ridiculous like that. That was opening night, but yeah, they had a lead for much of that game.
Yep.
So maybe the Red Hawks are still feeling a little bit of a letdown from that matchup on opening night, but you got to shake that off, and because WAC play is here and it's not going away.
Yep. They lost 81-72 to CSU Northridge in overtime, and they had the lead. I think CSU Northridge hit a shot at the buzzer to send it to overtime, if I remember right. So
correct.
They should have won that game, and ever since it's been a struggle. They lost by 31 at UC Irvine. They lost by 28 to Portland at home. They lost by 16 at Washington. They lost by 25 to Cal Poly at home. They hung around with Portland State. At Portland State, they lost by 7. So that's a good thing on Saturday, but got to get over that hump. Got to get over that hump in the WAC play, especially with the fact that only 8 teams go to WAC Vegas, and it's all based off of your conference record, your win-loss record in conference play. So this is where it starts. Who's going to get a leg up with that first win? Who's going to fall behind with that first loss? Let's talk about the final game of the night on the slate. UTRGV at GCU. Right now, UTRGV sits at 0-5. On the season. They've really struggled out of the gate. GCU 4-2 overall. Their losses coming to not to St. Mary's. They won on a buzzer beater against St. Mary's. Coming to Oregon and Montana at home at GCU Arena. So they've also beat St. Mary's. They won that on Nadia Evans' crazy three-pointer to win the game to start off the season. They won at North Dakota. They beat Fresno State and they beat Nicholls State this past weekend, really in dominating fashion like they should have. I don't know that this game is going to be close, but then again, the way that GCU starts games, or at least what we've seen so far this season, it may be close for a half, and then GCU just takes over in one of the third or fourth quarter and pulls away.
Yeah, Nicholls and Fresno were both around for about 2.5 quarters ish, and then the Lopes, turned it up and pulled away for nice wins at the end. And you talk about UTRGV, the Vaqueros may be 0, what'd you say, they were 0-5, but they've had a couple of close losses. They lost to Texas State by, I think it was 1, and then Oral Roberts by a possession or 2, among the notable scores on their ledger. So they've been in games. Again, it's a question of can you finish? And, Lane Lord was really excited when we talked to him in the preseason. He had a lot back from last year. Ayanna Dorsey, Deborah Ugayemi, the post player, among others. Charlotte O'Keefe, who had a really nice campaign also. he was really excited about this group, and so far they haven't had a win at all to show for it. But this would be a heck of a way for them to break through in the win column. I don't know that they can handle the GCU pressure well enough to keep themselves in this game.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I'm sorry, you guys. My camera went out. This is crazy. And I can't get my camera to work here. So I'm trying to work with this. I don't know why my camera completely went out. Hopefully I can get that back online. There we go. That's very strange. I had to change from one camera to the other. This is very, very strange, Daryl. I'm not sure what happened here with this camera. So I'll go back to this camera. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, guys. Kind of weird how that worked out. I'll have to figure out my camera situation soon. So with that being said, let's talk about I'm on board with the fact that GCU is going to route UTRGV tonight. I just think it's going to happen. Trinity San Antonio is going to go off. Yeah, and Olivia Lane's going to have her way in the paint. So I just think that this is going to be one of those games that going to be pretty ugly. No offense to Lane Lord and the Vaqueros. I just don't. They haven't shown me anything to say otherwise, right? Like they just haven't this year. And I'm sure Lane Lord would be the first to tell us, yeah, you're probably right. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a tough matchup for a struggling team to open up with in GCU. The preseason favorite to win the regular season championship, and that loaded team that Molly Miller has reloaded in Phoenix. But somebody had to start with the Lopes, and you know what? You start with a team that's at the top. Maybe you start, you get the easier, the teams that are towards your half later on, and you can stack some wins together, and all you got to do is get to the top 8 to get to Vegas.
Yep. So we'll see what happens with all that. So just a heads up again, the women's games tips off. It is UT Arlington at Abilene Christian at 6 p.m. Central on ESPN Plus. And then on the men's side, I'm trying to get to it here real quick. On the men's side, the early games, it looks like Charlton at Stephen F. Austin, Grand Canyon at UTRGV both tip off at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Abilene Christian, UT Arlington tip off at 7 p.m. Central Time. And then Utah Valley and CBU at Southern Utah both tip off at 7:30, or Seattle U at Utah Valley tips off at 7 p.m. Central Time. California Baptist at Southern Utah, 7:30 Central Time, 6:30 Mountain Time. So a lot of basketball going on tonight. Looking forward to it. Maybe we'll have a post-game recap, checking out things. I'm very disappointed that my other camera wasn't working. I don't know what was going on with that. I don't know if it got too hot or what. But, yeah, we're going to have at it. Daryl, appreciate the time, everybody. Thanks for checking in on us. Thanks for, tuning in. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss these live streams, these live preview shows, and these live recaps. We'll be here every day, 12:30, to just talk WAC hoops. In general, we'll have other guests on as well. But for myself and Daryl and everybody else, enjoy the games tonight, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Straight Outta WAC live stream.
Thanks for listening to the Straight Outta WAC podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting platforms. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Remember to follow WAC Hoops Nation on all your favorite social media platforms.